I think we should kickstart the webinar. So a warm welcome to everyone here and welcome to the CryptoBind Digital Insights. And we are going to talk about a lot in terms of eKYC, Aadhaar Data Vaults in today's webinar. So if you have ever opened a large bank account, signed up a mobile wallet, or even rented a car using your Aadhaar, you have already experienced something called eKYC. So the click seems pretty simple, but there's a lot of engineering that goes behind that, the click. And there's a lot of identity and there's a lot of safe data procedure that takes place behind those particular click and eKYC. So today we are going to share those insights on that entire process. We are going to talk about more on ADV, which is automated data digital verification, and eKYCs, electronic know your customers. We'll cover why Aadhaar Data Vault is treated so carefully, and what UIDAI actually expects from organizations, and how solutions like Aadhaar Data Vaults and tokenization work in tandem. So joining me today are two people who actually live and breathe this subject, Gaurav, Soni, and Harsh, both from CryptoBind. Gaurav, Harsh, welcome to the webinar.
Thank you, Sharda.
Thanks, Sharda.
Yeah. So let's just jump in and I'll bring in Gaurav. I want to start with the bigger picture, Gaurav. So why does Aadhaar data continue to be one of the most regulated categories of personal information, specifically in India?
Okay. So first of all, before starting, I would like to thank Sharda for welcoming us, and thank you everyone, and welcome to the session. So Sharda, coming on to your question, it's a simple way to understand this is to think about Aadhaar as a master key to your digital identity. Just as a master key can unlock multiple doors, Aadhaar is linked to several essential services like your bank account, your mobile connections, insurance, your government benefits, and many other identity-based services. So now imagine if this master key, it falls into wrong hands. So the impact isn't limited to just one account or one service. It can potentially affect multiple aspects of an individual's financial or digital identity. And that is the reason why Aadhaar is considered one of the most sensitive categories of personal information in India. So this is the reason, and to protect it, UIDAI has established some strict regulations governing on how the Aadhaar is collected, it is stored, it is processed, it is accessed and retained. So all those organizations which are handling Aadhaar data must comply with these requirements, and they need to ensure its confidentiality and its security. And so this is, so Aadhaar, it isn't just a piece of information in a database. So it is a critical identity asset. And that is precisely, why the regulatory framework is around it, and it is so stringent. Yeah, Shani.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Since Aadhaar is the master key and just not the password. So Harsh, let's build on that conversation what Gaurav has just said. There's a lot of confusion in the study about how this data actually meant to be stored. Basically, storing that Aadhaar data we have that. There's a lot of confusion around it. There's a lot of lot of speculations around this data. How should the data be stored? So what do the latest UIDAI guidelines say about storing Aadhaar numbers in enterprise applications as well as in database? Yeah, Harsh.
Okay, so to understand what the data needs to be stored in the Aadhaar Data Vault versus what needs to be or what can be stored outside, let's take a quick look at, say, the background or the history of the ADV compliance that came into place. So it was launched initially in 2017. Certain regulations and guidelines were specified in 2017 itself, which spoke about how the actual Aadhaar data versus the demographic data needs to be stored in what location and how they can be or cannot have any relation between them to ensure security. So that was the first iteration. Then after that, the revised guidelines were released, I think in July of 2025. So after almost, say, 7 or 8 years almost, the revised guidelines were launched. And then again, once these guidelines were launched in July, there was a revision issued immediately in November itself. So that is why I think there has been a lot of confusion as to where this data needs to be stored. But the basic, crux or bottom of the story remains the same, that you cannot store Aadhaar data or Aadhaar number specifically in plain text format in your production databases or any other applications wherever Aadhaar data currently is being stored. It has to be that you need to perform a tokenization activity and you need to replace the sensitive data, that is the Aadhaar information, with a token. So you can say store demographic data as per the latest guidelines. You can store the demographic data outside of the Aadhaar Data Vault in your, say, local databases. But for that also, you need to ensure that it is not stored along with the Aadhaar number. So, Aadhaar number and demographic data are two different things. Your Aadhaar number is the actual identifier, versus your demographic data is all the other information such as your name, date of birth, maybe it's your Aadhaar, image on the Aadhaar card, address. All of the other information that is related to Aadhaar is classified as demographic data. So as long as this demographic data is being stored independently and not with the Aadhaar number, you can store it in other local databases. But if this data is being collected together, if you are required to store this data together, then as a whole, it needs to be, say, tokenized and stored in the Aadhaar Data Vault, and everywhere else it needs to be replaced with the reference token.
Yeah, I mean, basically, it's also about the limiting the touch points as well. If you can double click on that as well, yeah.
Yeah, so it's about minimizing the overall footprint or the spread of Aadhaar numbers. Yeah.
All right. So, my follow-up question would be in terms of the compliance controls. So, what are the key compliance controls that organizations should focus on while handling this sensitive Aadhaar data?
So in terms of key compliance controls, I think the best reference point for any organization, of course, is the ADV guidelines. What the guidelines dictate is fairly straightforward and clear. But when we talk about compliance for Aadhaar data, it is important to understand that UIDAI is not just asking organizations to encrypt this data. The objective for Aadhaar Data Vault is to reduce the overall risk that is associated with handling of the Aadhaar numbers. So the latest guidelines, they emphasize on a combination of, say, architectural or technical and operational controls, rather than just relying on a single security mechanism, that is encryption. So most important is obviously data minimization. So organizations need to avoid storing Aadhaar numbers whenever they're not absolutely required. So the whole purpose of Aadhaar Data Vault is itself, say, limited. It is limiting the purpose of having Aadhaar Data Vault. If you don't need to store the number, don't store the number. That is the first guideline. Then the second key control is, of course, the architecture of the vault. Rather than allowing any business or application to store and process Aadhaar numbers directly, actually the Aadhaar number should be tokenized, and only a reference token needs to be utilized within the applications. So that is another key compliance that needs to be looked after. And then third is also utilizing very, very strong techniques of encryption and the way in which this reference token gets generated. So that is also important, that you utilize best practices, you utilize the latest controls, that is AES 256 as of now for encryption, that is standard for generating the reference tokens. Also, it needs to not just be hashing of the Aadhaar numbers, but you need to use some kind of a tokenization method or technique to generate it. The tokens need to be of a certain specific type or standard. And then, of course, when we talk about, say, tokenization or encryption, then we cannot ignore the topic of reference keys. We cannot ignore the topic of actual encryption key, how the keys are managed. So this key management and storage also needs to be done through with the help of hardware-backed security. So again, ADV guidelines are very, very clear on this. It is, I think, more clear than most compliances that you need to have a FIPS 142 level 3 certified HSM. Currently, the standard obviously is FIPS 143 level 3. So it is obviously, it says FIPS 142 level 3 or higher. So any HSM that is at least FIPS 142 level 3 compliant is mandatory or is mandated by the compliance. we use that HSM as the hardware-backed security mechanism to store the keys. So these are all the key, say, compliance controls organizations must not skip whenever they want to implement Aadhaar Data Vault.
That's great. So I'll put the encryption part in the key compliances as one of the next question that I want to ask Gaurav as well. So does the encryption alone solves the problem, Gaurav? And can organizations continue storing Aadhaar numbers in their core applications if the data is encrypted? Does that encryption alone solves the problem?
So, Shada, that's a question we hear quite often, and the simple answer is no. Actually, encryption is essential, but by itself, it isn't enough. So let me explain with a simple example. So imagine you have kept your valuables in a locked safe. That certainly is more safer, than letting them into an open environment. But if the safe is placed in an area where anyone can access it, the overall security is still compromised. So the same principle applies to Aadhaar data. So encryption protects the data by making it unreadable without the encryption key. However, the compliance isn't just about how the data is protected. So it is also about where is it stored and who can access it and how that access is controlled. So this is why UIDAI expect organizations not to store Aadhaar data in their everyday business applications, like your CRM or customer databases or loan processing systems, or even if the data is encrypted. So that is one of the reasons. And instead, Aadhaar information should be stored in a dedicated or a highly secured environment, specially designed to protect the sensitive identity data, and which is commonly known as the Aadhaar Data Vault. So the takeaway is very simple. Encryption protects the data, but an Aadhaar Data Vault protects the entire environment around it. So, and true compliance requires both the things. And that is what is my answer to your questions.
Yeah. So now we are through with the encryption part, making sure that encryptions alone is, it's very important to have that encrypted data as well. Now we have thrown a lot of light on how the encryption works and how encryption is pretty important for this. I would also bring in Gaurav for next part of question, wherein I would like to throw some light on the challenges in ADV compliances. So what challenges do organizations typically face when trying to comply with ADV requirements? Gaurav?
Okay, so what? This is where the implementation becomes more challenging than the regulation itself. Most large organizations, they have systems, they have been evolved over the years. So, new applications are added, the older one continues to run. The data gets actually distributed across multiple platforms. So bringing all of that into a compliant Aadhaar Data Vault environment, it is really not simple task. So the first challenge is the legacy system. Many existing applications were never designed with Aadhaar Data Vault requirements into mind. So, modifying them without disrupting the business operations, it requires a very careful planning. And the second challenge is that data sprawl. So over the time, Aadhaar data often gets duplicated across CRM or customer databases, reports, backups, and even the spreadsheets. So before you can secure the data, the first thing which you need to know is that, identify where the data is. And the third challenge which the organizations face is that business continuity. So organizations, they cannot pause their customer onboarding or their business operations. So while they implement the compliance. So the transition has to happen while day-to-day operations continue seamlessly. And finally, what's that? So there's the investment and change management aspect. So implementing a secure vault, integrating their applications and training teams, all these things require time, resources, and the most important thing is that the organization should be committed for that. So while the compliance objective is very straightforward, but achieving it requires a well-planned strategy. And that balances, all the aspects, the security aspect, the technology aspect, and the third one, which is uninterrupted business operations. Sure.
Yeah, Gaurav, that's absolutely correct, and I mean totally agree with the compliance. How it's very important to actually comply by the latest compliances for the organizations, and the way the transformation of these organizations handle sensitive data.
Yes.
Harsh, I'd like to bring you here, as you mentioned about the tokenization, the role of tokenization in the whole eKYC and Aadhaar Data Vaults. So what does the tokenization role play in achieving this Aadhaar compliance?
So tokenization is, I think, as a concept more critical than encryption itself because it directly identifies or directly say addresses one of the first or key requirements in UIDAI's compliance, and that is to minimize the exposure of Aadhaar numbers. So if you see or if you refer purely to encryption, then encryption is going to apply on the same Aadhaar data, and wherever the data is stored, you're just encrypting it, and the location of that data is not going to change. So if you have other data spread across 10 to 15 databases, um, if you apply encryption in those databases, the location of the other data is still the same. It is encrypted. It is, say, there is protection added to it, but it is located or residing in the same location. Tokenization, what it allows you to achieve is it goes beyond just encrypting the data. You're actually generating an additional value or an additional token, say. And what this will allow you to do is you can replace all the Aadhaar data that was stored in, say, these multiple databases with this reference token. And you can store all that Aadhaar data, you can store multiple copies of Aadhaar data in a single location. That is your Aadhaar Data Vault. So that is how tokenization plays a key role, I would say, in achieving this compliance, because the token, it serves a purpose of, say, without exposing sensitive Aadhaar data, you can say use it for your day-to-day business operations. So if you have any, say, if you in an organization there are multiple applications, there is CRM, there is, say, if it's a banking system, there is a loan management application, there are various HR functions for which other data is getting collected and consumed. So having, as I said, multiple copies stored in multiple locations and then encrypting those, tokenization will allow you to, say, replace all of these copies with reference tokens, which may or may not be same in format. That is one of the technical considerations of Aadhaar Data Vault. But primarily the objective is to reduce the exposure and reduce the attack surface. So that is how storing it in one location makes more sense, and protecting it with reference tokens makes more sense.
Yeah, talking about the exposure, I also want to double click on that. How an Aadhaar Data Vault reduces exposure, Harsh? If you can just elaborate on what in the previous question.
So to understand this, let's look at how traditionally organizations were, say, handling Aadhaar data. In any conventional, say, enterprise environment, once the organization completed, say, the Aadhaar eKYC transaction, or once they received the Aadhaar number, it was often stored directly within the company's multiple business applications. So, for example, if a customer onboarding system, it would maintain a copy, a CRM would maintain another copy. As I said, multiple departments would maintain independent copies. So this creates, say, several security and compliance challenges. Every copy of Aadhaar number increases the attack surface. And organizations now, as I said, if they have to secure multiple databases or enforce the access controls in different locations and manage the encryption and also all of these locations, it becomes a very, very big challenge. So that is the first key requirement that Aadhaar Data Vault addresses. And that is, it reduces the problem by fundamentally changing the architecture. So instead of allowing every application to store a number, it will store the reference token. And it is like only the applications or only the processes or business units which require Aadhaar number in plain text format. Only they will be provided the plain text Aadhaar number via a process called detokenization. So it is basically, if you see, in technical terms, it is going to be a lookup table. So one-time activity of tokenizing the Aadhaar numbers and storing them in one place. Everywhere else, the data gets replaced with reference tokens. Only when the application makes a call or when the application requires an Aadhaar number, they will get the plain text copy back via retokenization. And certain solutions, such as CryptoBind's Aadhaar Data Vaults solution, it also allows you to say mask this number at the time of detokenization.
All right, all right. So Harsh, if I would, like to pull another layer to it and get into the architectural considerations for implementing an ADV, right? So this is the completely implementation part of ADV. So what are the architectural considerations? And this is too much technical on that. Yeah. So what are the architectural considerations when implementing an ADV in an existing environment? And if you can, for the greater good of our technical team here as well, and for the audience, you can explain how a technical, architectural considerations for implementing an ADV takes place.
Okay. So I'll try to remain as straightforward and non-technical and answer as possible, because we can get into a lot of discussion when we talk about system architecture and how to handle large volumes of data. But first and foremost, the good thing is that the guidelines now obviously allow you to store or say position your other data vault, not just in an on-prem kind of an environment, but you can also host it in a GCC cloud environment. The latest guidelines also allow you to take Aadhaar Data Vault as a service from, say, the already registered AU eKYCs or GCC empaneled cloud service providers or any existing Aadhaar Data Vault solution providers who have in the past done deployments on-prem. So all of these, hold on 1 second. Yeah. So as I was saying, all of these the flexibility that has been provided now obviously opens the door to various different architectures being allowed for Aadhaar Data Vault, So then the next thing to consider is obviously whether or not you have an on-prem data center to position the HSM and other data vault solutions. So there's two main aspects to an ADV solution. One is, of course, having an HSM, which is traditionally a hardware device. And second, obviously, is the software stack of Aadhaar Data Vault, which is going to be your tokenization engine or your integrations with the end application and with the vault and all of those things. So if you don't have, say, any dedicated data center, or if you don't want to invest on, say, procuring a rack space to position the HSM, you can, say, go towards an ADV as a SaaS, ADV as a service, or ADV that is deployed on a cloud platform. The HSM at least is hosted in a GCC kind of environment. That is the first flexibility or architectural consideration. Second, of course, is Aadhaar Data is most of the organizations, say big banks or big enterprise organizations or any of the HRMS solution providers, they deal in, say, lakhs and crores of Aadhaar numbers. Because as the identity itself, Aadhaar data is something which every Indian citizen should have an Aadhaar data of its own. And if you see in the true sense of the compliance, every organization or every body storing or processing Aadhaar data needs to implement Aadhaar Data Vault. So as much as possible, the big organizations are focusing or are trying their best to comply with Aadhaar Data Vault solutions. So for the big ones, there's obviously a question of volumetrics as well. If they have lakhs and lakhs or crores of Aadhaar data, then they need to make sure that the architecture that they're the underlying architecture is highly scalable. It is spread across the multiple environments, and those kind of challenges need to be considered as the data scales up. So these are some of the important, architectural considerations or things to keep in mind when you're implementing an ADV solution.
Yeah. Thank you, Harsh, for sharing such a vivid picture of the compliances, the requirements, the prerequisites, and everything. Now I want to shift my discussion for eKYC, and I would like to bring in Gaurav for this. Gaurav, starting with a basic questions of difference between, the the relationship between eKYC services and Aadhaar Data Vault implementation. So if you can also give us your insights on what do you think would be the proper relationship between eKYC services and Aadhaar Data Vault implementation.
Okay, so that's a great question, Sharda. So these are often viewed as a separate concepts, but in reality, these are two parts of the same process. So in a simple way to understand this is to think eKYC as the reception desk and of an organization. And while the Aadhaar Data Vault is a secure records room behind it. So the reception is where the customer's identity is verified, whether through OTP authentication or biometric verification or by scanning the Aadhaar QR code. So it's the point actually where the Aadhaar information is received and it is validated. But just a moment, there's a disruption here. Okay. Okay. So where was I? So I was talking about reception and the record room. But once this verification is complete, the responsibility shifts to protecting that sensitive data. So instead of storing it within the application, of the eKYC, the data should be securely moved into the Aadhaar Data Vault. So where it is protected with the appropriate security controls and access policies. So if I have to, say this thing in a simple words, so eKYC verifies the customer's identity, while the Aadhaar Data Vault, it safeguards the Aadhaar data after verification. So both are equally important. Secure eKYC process without secure Aadhaar Data Vault leaves a critical gap in the overall compliance framework. And that is why organizations should design both together. They should ensure that seamless customer experience is there in the front end and robust data protection is there at the back end. So that's it, Sharda.
Yeah. So that's a good way to actually look at it. Identity verification and data protection must go hand in hand. So this naturally brings me to the next, question, and especially to you, Gaurav. So what security and compliance controls are expected from AUA and KUA entities?
Okay. So to begin with, first let us understand what is AUA. So AUA is Authentication User Agency and KUA is KYC User Agency. So these are organizations which are authorized by UIDAI to perform Aadhaar authentication and eKYC services. So these include these like banks, there are AUA, KUA, then telecom providers, NBFCs, fintech companies, and other approved entities by the UIDAI. So these are some of the AUA, KUA. So a simple way to look at it as like authorization comes with a responsibility. So just because an organization is permitted to access the Aadhaar services, it doesn't mean that it can handle the data in any way it chooses. So it must or it has to actually continuously meet the UIDAI security and compliance requirements. So what are these requirements? These requirements include implementing strong security controls such as encryption, role-based access, audit logging, and secure key management. So organizations are also expected to use approved infrastructure. They need to undergo periodic security audits. They need to maintain compliance records and have a well-defined incident response procedure in place. So all of these things are required for any organization who's dealing with the customer data. Or basically I'm talking about the AUA. So equally important is that these responsibility, it is not limited to AUA, but even it extends to their technology partners and the service providers who are associated with the AUA. Whether an organization builds the solution in-house or it works with a partner like us, like CryptoBind, so it remains accountable for ensuring that the entire ecosystem it complies of UIDAI security standard. It complies with the UIDAI security standard. So becoming an AUA and KUA, it's not a one-time certification they get. So it is an ongoing commitment. It's basically they have to protect the Aadhaar data, they have to maintain the compliance and preserve the customer's trust. So this is why, it is important for AUK.
Yeah. Thank you, Gaurav, for breaking that two things in a simpler manner. So now I'd like to shift the discussion on CryptoBind specifically, and I would like to bring in Harsh. Harsh, how does CryptoBind solutions align with UIDAI requirements, and what makes these products stand out in the market?
Okay. So first and foremost is obviously, CryptoBind ADV is a solution that has been in the market now for almost, say, 5 to 6 years at least. It is one of the more mature solutions, and still, maturity is not just a good enough, metric to say that it's a good solution. There has to be some more proof against it as well. So we have in the past done major deployments for our Aadhaar Data Vault solution. Some of the most notable ones are in places such as NIC, which is National Informatics Center, where we're handling roughly 130 to 140 crore Aadhaar records. So it is on an architectural level, it is more of an ADV as a service example, because Aadhaar Data Vault solution that we have established and positioned at NIC is handling the Aadhaar data of various government departments for various government schemes. So the government departments actually are consuming this Aadhaar data Vault solution, and that is why I would say that it is one of the first examples of ADV as a service. So currently, the recent guidelines have said that ADV as a service is possible, but we implemented something a very long time ago for on a very huge scale, first of all. So in terms of handling such large projects or the volumetrics of Aadhaar data, we have the solution is proven in that sense, first of all. And second, obviously, is as the guidelines dictate very clearly is the security policies that need to be in place, such as having the UUID-based reference token generation method, or having a FIPS compliant hardware device. So we already have the FIPS compliant hardware device in our overall portfolio or solution stack. CryptoBind HSMs come with a FIPS 143 level 3 certified, boundary. And apart from that, also, as I was talking about, the various security mechanisms built into the ADV system itself. So, as I said, the various methods of generating the reference tokens, or the various methods through which the actual data is getting encrypted before the reference token is generated against that data. Even the application whitelisting process, or ensuring that only specific applications can access the Aadhaar data or the actual plaintext Aadhaar number at the time of de-tokenization. And then going above and beyond to also, say, integrate a module for dynamically masking this Aadhaar data at the time of de-tokenization. So it is a very, very robust and well-defined access control mechanism that we have ensured in the Aadhaar data Vault solution. Then again, as I was talking about the architectural considerations, so we do have Aadhaar Data Vault as a service, as an offering, where you can have independent, fully isolated vaults and independent partitions for managing the keys of each of the customers. So again, this is something which is very, very beneficial for the SaaS solution providers. So for example, any of the HRMS platforms who have multiple organizations as their customers, and they want to enforce or implement another data vault solution at that scale. So that is where, again, ADV is a SaaS offering. Now we have completely built it, or it is more easily accessible to a large audience or a large number of customers than just, say, a single deployment at NIC that we've done in the past. And another thing, as I was talking about, the volumetrics that need to be handled. So there's a very important activity that needs to be done initially at the time of onboarding the Aadhaar Data Vault solution. That is called your migration or bulk tokenization activity. So all existing Aadhaar records need to be migrated to the Aadhaar Data Vault solution. So we have got the custom APIs for bulk tokenization and de-tokenization, which makes the job easier initially when setting up the Aadhaar data vault solution. That is one thing. And again, coming on to the eKYC side of things, or eKYC solution. So, eKYC response, it's in there are multiple ways in which eKYC response or say authentication response is received. So when we talk about say AUAs or authentication user agency, they only get the authentication of whether or not the user is having a valid Aadhaar number or not. So it's basically a yes/no response. When we talk about KUAs, which is actually your KYC related processes. So for that, you actually get the Aadhaar number plus the eKYC XML response or JSON response. So again, independent endpoints have been designed to handle either if it is just an authentication request or whether it is an actual eKYC response through XML or JSON. Those can be stored as well. There is again a different endpoint where you can say have Aadhaar numbers read from a CSV file and then tokenization will take place on those records. So that is how it is a solution which is very easy to integrate, very flexible in terms of how it needs to be positioned. And there's obviously a proven track record for the solution as well in terms of the past deployments and the stability of the platform.
Yeah, that's great. Harsh, before we get into the compliance journey and I go to Gaurav for this question, out of curiosity, I was asking, I mean, this Aadhaar data is as good as the SSN numbers for US, right? So if we tend to expand our wings to the other geographical territories, let's say USA, so the whole the compilation of the things that you said remains the same. It's just the jurisdiction boundaries that we need to cater to, the compliances that we need to cater to, and the whole things remains the same. Is it like that?
So yes and no, because I don't think we need to go to any other jurisdiction or any other country or imagine that kind of scenario. We ourselves have seen that there's a lot of other identifiers or sensitive information apart from Aadhaar data itself. So you have PAN numbers, you have passport IDs, you have driving license, anything as per the context in which you're talking of can be a sensitive information. So if you talk about, say, healthcare, so that is PHI records, customer or other patient records, or any history of the patient's healthcare records, that becomes sensitive in that context. You talk about payment card information, PCI records. So in that, again, your account numbers or your credit card numbers, your credit score, that becomes sensitive. So the solution that we have for Aadhaar data, yes, it is restricted to handling only Aadhaar numbers. But there obviously is it's fairly simple to expand this solution to handle other kinds of PII data as well. So we have obviously in our stack itself a PII data vault solution. We call it Secure Vault. So Secure Vault ADV and Secure Vault PII data vault. They're the two types of solution or two distinctions that we have. PII data vault solution plainly is open to say any kind of PII data that, as I said, fits in that specific context. So if tomorrow we have a customer that comes that's from the healthcare industry, we will configure those specific sensitive fields to be tokenized. For anybody coming from the BFSI sector, if they say that we want these fields to be tokenized and secured, then we can do that as well. Bottom line is the concept remains the same. Tokenization reduces the spread of sensitive data in multiple applications or databases, and it consolidates them into a single repository or a single location and replaces it with reference tokens. So it can obviously, as you said, be used for other countries as well. But in that case, other countries' compliance norms need to be looked after. So the reason why we also designed ADV separately is because ADV specifically mentions certain mechanisms to say handle the reference tokens or the ways in which the keys need to be secured. PI data vault solution on its own can be utilized with a KMS itself for key management and secure key storage, or it can be used with an HSM as well. So there's a flexibility for PI data vault, which handles multiple types of data. But for Aadhaar data vault, it specifically requires or mandates an HSM. So the internal structure and processing of Aadhaar data slightly changes. So those are the few things that need to be considered when you want to say expand this solution to handle other kinds of data.
That's pretty reasonable. Yeah, Harsh, and just also want to have a quick follow-up questions on that as well. What do you see according to you are the basic domains which are too eager to get their Aadhaar Data Vault implemented? I mean, we have fintech, we have healthcare industry as well, we have pharma industry, we have logistic industries. Every industry works on pretty sensitive data. I mean, data is the new oil. Everyone says that, but which industry, according to you, thinks that at this present point of a time are in the urgent need of Aadhaar Data Vault implementation?
I would say every industry is,
Yeah.
because if you see, the compliance was released back in 2017. So it's
Yeah.
almost, say, 8 to 9 years since Aadhaar Data Vault solution or Aadhaar Data Vault was recommended by UIDAI. And we still, to this date, get requirements from fairly big names or medium to medium to big size companies, sorry. So they do come to us saying that we need an unwritable solution. So we obviously never say no to these requests because it is a straightforward compliance that they're trying to meet. But it often begs the question, that why have these companies, say, delayed the implementation of Aadhaar Data Vault for such a long period of time? So this is, again, not just Aadhaar Data Vault, but in general, as they say, security is something which is never given the required amount of priority by big companies in the industry. So it is not the right way to go, obviously. But yeah, it is the way it is. Things are the way they are. So I would say every industry should focus at the present to finish up quickly with the implementation of Aadhaar Data Vault because there are bigger or more pressing issues that are going to come soon with the DPDP Act that is going to come into picture, say, in May of 2027. So, it's about being sure that you don't get penalized, then ADV is something which you need to focus on immediately. You also need to side by side start preparing for being DPDP compliant. So that's how I think every industry should, in a way, focus on this. And I would say that UIDAI has made or has given certain leeway in terms of implementing the solution. So earlier it was that there were AUA KUAs, there were certain ASA KSAs who would say fetch the eKYC data or authentication data from UIDAI and then forward it back to the AUA KUA. So anybody who wants to perform this eKYC process needs to have an AUA KUA license. Then of course when they receive the Aadhaar data, they need to implement Aadhaar Data Vault. But now there is a concept called sub-AUA KUA. So if you're a sub-AUA KUA, it is basically, it allows you to use the architecture, it allows you to use the Aadhaar Data Vault solution or the HSM infrastructure of your AUA KUA itself. So any, say, small NBFC can become a sub-AUA KUA of an already existing big bank that is an AUA KUA. And that is how the services can then be utilized without having to invest much on the user infrastructure needed to implement Aadhaar Data Vault. So that is how UIDAI themselves are, say, promoting or ensuring that the Aadhaar Data Vault solution is widely adopted and that security of Aadhaar number is of topmost priority across various industries.
Yeah, and I've also seen of late the government push of, from the government side of, they are pushing things in terms of companies to, deploy these Aadhaar Data Vaults and keep the sensitive data and everything. Exactly. We have the compliances in place. We have the repercussions also in place, right? In terms of DPDP Act and the fees that if you're not, adapting the DPDP, we have that fees. I think it's 250 crores for DPDP, if I'm not wrong. Yeah. Okay, thanks, Harsh, for giving such good insights on this Aadhaar. It sounds huge, but then again, the implementation part and the awareness part is still somewhat lacking in Indian ecosystem, as far as my opinion is concerned. Yeah, coming back to Gaurav. We wanted to have a quick discussions on the priorities as well. Yeah. So can you also list 3 priorities to start this compliance journey and with that? If any organization is starting its Aadhaar compliance journey today, what should be its top 3 priorities, according to you, Gaurav?
Okay, so Shara, that's the great way to conclude. So if I had to summarize our discussion into 3 practical priorities, these would be the first one will be identify where your Aadhaar data resides. So before you implement any security control, or basically an organization, implementing any security controls, they need to first have the visibility into where their Aadhaar data is stored. Then it might be across applications, databases, backups, reports. So you can't protect the data till the time you know where the data exists. So that is the first thing any organization should first understand. The second priority or the second thing which the organization should focus on is that they need to build a right kind of a security foundation. So instead of relying on fragmented or a temporary solutions, they need to invest into a dedicated Aadhaar data vault that is designed to meet the UIDAI security and compliance requirement. The building the right kind of a foundation from the starts, it makes the compliance far more manageable in the long run. And the third and the last thing which the organization should, keep it as a priority is that that make compliance an ongoing practice. So as the regulations and technology keep on evolving, organizations should regularly review their systems, and they should ensure that they continue to meet the compliance requirements. So the roadmap is straightforward. First, know your data. Second is that they need to secure it with the right kind of infrastructure. And third, that they need to continuously monitor their compliance posture. So basically, organizations that focus on all these 3 priorities will be well positioned. Yeah, they will be well positioned to build a secure, compliant, and a future-ready Aadhaar ecosystem. Right? I hope that answers the question, Sharda. Yeah.
Yes, it does, Gaurav. And thank you so much for, actually, that was a good, excellent summary, actually, from, coming from your end. To summarize the whole discussion altogether with the compliances, with the DPDP Act, with the eKYC and Aadhaar Data Vault implementation coming from Harsh. With that, we conclude this session. And Gaurav, Harsh, thank you both so much for breaking down such a technical and important topic, in a layman's point of view, with a bit of technicalities involved, with the implementation part and everything. And thank you once again for the audience for logging in and be part of this webinar. I would request the audience as well to actually, to share this webinar to their counterparts, or they can have this webinar for their own, study purposes or for references as well. All right.
Yes, thank you.
So thank you everyone for joining this webinar. Thank you so much. Thanks, Sharda.
Thank you.
Sharda, in case if anybody has any questions.
We have, we can open polls for question and answers. If we have any questions coming from the audience, both Harsh and Gaurav will be more than happy to take those. You can write your questions if anyone want to, or we can ask our marketing team to hand over the voice access to actually put on the questions.
Yes, I think the session was very explanatory and
right. That's why you don't have any
questions today. But yes, of course, we'll be happy to answer any question later whenever you can. Post it or mail it to us. We will share the answers on that mail.
Perfect. All right. Thank you so much again, Harsh and Gaurav.
Thank you, Shraddha.
Thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you so much. Thanks, Sharda. Thanks, Harsh.